Welcome back to More Than a Game, a podcast dedicated to the Premier League, the A-League and more. Today on the show, it's our Premier League season 2020-21 review. And so while Liverpool's title defence was cut down in its prime by a Pickford karate kick and a train wreck of injuries, Pep's Man City walked in the league. In the COVID season 2.0, we saw Fat Frank bite off more than he could chew, Mourinho sacked in season 2, Super League frustration, and a Big Sam relegation. I'm Colby, and like Leicester, I've gone missing towards the end of the season, but I'm back to take you through it all. And I'm joined by the full complement of the MTAG boys. We've got Andy and George with you from London. We've got Tommie C in the quarantine studio. We've got Jesse coming at you from Castle, Liverpool, and Damo coming at you from Melbourne's hottest COVID hotspot and turtleneck capital of the world. Boys, how are we all? Let's start with you, Damo. How you feeling tonight?
Yeah, good. That was a great intro, and this is the best reunion since Friends last week. So.
And Jesse, how are you tonight, mate? I see you're on the Guinness nice and early for a Sunday.
Yeah, I was having a beer this afternoon. I was worried about peaking early, but then my thoughts crossed to the boys in London who are probably still drunk. And that gave me great solace, and I felt like I was prepared.
Let's throw to the boys in London now. It's coming on 11 a.m. Your time, Andy and George. How are you boys feeling after the Champions League final last night?
Oh, look, I'll let George go first.
Feeling pretty good, boys. Feeling pretty good. It's always good to end the season on a high.
You're looking good. You're looking good, boys, both of you. You're not dusty at all. Obviously, we're recording this. It's streaming live on YouTube, listeners. You can always get around us. We post links to that on our social media and elsewhere as well. And you can see Andy and George and the fine state they're in this morning after a big night of Champions League action last night. And finally, Tommie, how are you this evening, mate? I don't know what day we're up to, but you're still looking pretty fresh and in good spirits.
Mate, feeling fresh. I think it's day 8 now, or day 9. So yeah, home stretch now. Looking forward to getting home.
Are you allowed to go back home?
Yeah,
Tommy? That's the question.
First question.
Well, I'll be able to get home, but when I get home, I won't be able to leave my house again. So.
Some things change and some things remain the same.
Yep.
Big show coming up today, all. We'll take you through some highs and lows of the season. We're going to revisit some of our predictions and check the tapes. And we're going to review each team's performance in this season's Premier League. But first, we'll just have a little bit of a chat about the Champions League final. I figured we'd bolt this on, seeing as though we've got George here and Chelsea have won their second Champions League and a cagey 1-0 match against Manchester City in Portugal this morning, Australian time. More on your season predictions for Chelsea later in the pod, George. But first, what a moment for you boys. Talk us through your night and talk us through the match.
I don't think anyone wants to hear about my night, Colby, but I remember there was a cigar at some point. Now it's about some whiskey.
It sounds more entertaining than the match.
Yeah, it was probably one of the finest Sumatran cigars that you could
yeah.
You can buy at your local off license. But yeah, I mean, the match I'd say for everyone as described, pretty underwhelming. I mean, as finals often are, but I mean, every cliche that you've probably already read has been thrown out there on. It was Pep overthinking his lineup and tinkering too much, or a real attack versus defence. And Tommie, do you want to throw in the immovable force, immovable object, unstoppable force one? But I don't know. It's
my favourite.
Yeah, again, just a fairly underwhelming final for City fans, and probably neutrals too. But Chelsea got the business done, didn't they?
I just thought Tuchel sort of had the right strategy, the right lineup. Maybe there was sort of even with a couple of injuries to Thiago Silva, Christensen came in, did really well, and I can't remember City actually creating too many chances or testing Mendy very much, and so it looked like one of those games where Chelsea were going to, like similar to the Real Madrid sort of semi, where like they just needed to take their chances and Havertz took one to that last night, and probably Chelsea should have probably won by more, in my opinion, because they seem to be able to get through the Man City lines. And yeah, it's good that they actually managed to win a game where they actually created a lot of chances, and it just looks like Tuchel's got Pep's number.
Yeah, it looks like it. I think, what's that? 3 out of the last 4 meetings, I think Tuchel's got him. And Andy, you mentioned all the cliches that have come out about Pep already. Tinkering with his starting lineup, notably omitting a defensive midfielder and starting the out of form Sterling. Obviously, that's a genius move if it comes off, but as it was, City just had 1 shot on goal with an XG of something like 0.5. Boys, did Pep really overthink it, or is it just a curse set by Yaya Touré's African charm?
Yeah, so that's what I forgot. I was waiting for someone to bring that up too.
I think
it's going to get brought up until he wins another Champions League, so it's here to stay.
In
think
2050 when Aguero's still there.
Yeah. I think he cooked it. I don't think I think a lot of focus can be on the defensive midfielder mission because, in hindsight, you look at the situation, you think, well, if they'd had someone to plug the gap in there, it might have been better. But I actually think if you focus on the Sterling side of things, he has played the odd game, and I say the odd game because there hasn't been many in the home straight in the Premier League, and he's just looks so short of confidence. Yeah. So I just don't understand how he can think a player that's low on confidence is just going to snap back into confidence on the bigger stage. It was a massive gamble, and it backfired on him, unfortunately, for City fans.
Yeah, and I think you're
also,
right.
Also, Kante just kept Kevin De Bruyne the most quiet I've ever seen him play, and he's a big game player. He always stands up, and I think I read a stat earlier that Kante won more aerial duels than anyone in Chelsea's team in the final, and he's 5'5".
Yeah, he's shorter than me. But you're right. He absolutely kept shut De Bruyne down until Rudiger's big rig really put him down for the count as well. So my heart goes out to De Bruyne a little bit. You think for a guy who's player of the season to have to walk off in the biggest game when.
On the topic of De Bruyne's injury, did you guys sort of wonder if there's something more to the injury or something? I saw he went off and you could see he had the beginnings of a bit of a black eye starting to come up. But you sort of think to yourself, if he's got a black eye, is that the injury? Could he not play through that?
I think he was concussed from it. I think that's what it was.
So it's not every day you run into big bad Tony. Rudiger did a number on him.
And Rudiger had quite the game himself as well with that crucial block on Foden and was just pretty imperious for the whole game. And George, like you said, when Christensen came on, he deputised quite ably for Thiago Silva. A lot of the Chelsea boys played very well, and I think you're probably right, George. The sort of better team, at the very least tactically, not really on paper necessarily, but tactically the better team sort of seemed to win on the night.
Even with Timo providing, keeping City in the game, it's happening a lot this season.
Yeah, there was a lot of memes about Timo going on during the match and after, and what's going to happen to him next season? Is he going to, are they going to have patience with him?
He can't get any worse, Colby. So
yeah, the only way is up.
He'll probably be the top scorer at the Euros.
Yeah, frustrating for everyone. Any other observations on this one, boys?
No, just the habits influence, how him playing as a number 9 and being able to link up the play, and then you've got your runners, Mount, Pulisic, and Timo Werner running off him. So I think maybe Chelsea might have stumbled into a winning formation there in terms of the actual personnel. So
that was it, wasn't it? There were 2 teams just with quality all over the pitch, just playing without strikers, and you just couldn't help but think in both of the games if both of these teams had strikers who were world class and sort of playing in their absolute peak of their powers and form, both of those sides would be absolute forces to be reckoned with. But as it was, they were it was almost 10v10 with no strikers.
Yeah, and then I think it might actually create a bit of an impetus for especially maybe City to replace Aguero with someone like Kane or Haaland or Mbappe or someone. It's gonna make them really think they need to replace them and replace Aguero and perhaps throw a lot of money at the problem.
Yeah, because you're right. Because if they'd won a final, there'd be a fine argument to say, well, look, we picked up a treble without a striker. Like maybe we just don't fix it. But now this and Jesus, by the way, did absolutely nothing.
It was terrible.
Don't remember seeing him on the ball. Don't remember anything. Are
you saying you don't believe in Jesus?
I've lost faith in Jesus. Yes. But one also quick shout out on the Chelsea backline, not just two guys in the middle, but Chile B and Reece James, I thought were outstanding. James in particular, didn't give Sterling half a yard to get anywhere near the box, and was up and down all night. He was shifting the ball from the back to Chelsea. I thought he was outstanding. Probably one of the best on the pitch.
Very good. And yeah, so Chelsea will be the reigning European champions until next season, where Pep might give it another go. Who knows? But we'll be of course covering that on the pod. We should get into our Premier League season overview though, boys. Few talking points here. Let's just whip through a few season highlights and lowlights. We'll start with you, Tommie. What's on your mind?
Mate, it's harder to go past Lanzini's banger against Spurs to make it 3-3 back in October. I mean, that was a candidate for goal of the season for some people, but yeah, that definitely was one of the highlights of the season for me. What else? There was actually two other games that were really early on in the season, which involved Liverpool. I think it was the first round when Liverpool hosted Leeds. That was a highlight. And the other one was when Liverpool got tonked by Villa. I'm probably stealing everyone else's highlights right now, or lowlights, depending on who you support. But I'm just throwing it out there.
How dare you?
Don't remember that, Tommie. Well, Damo, let's quickly throw to you. Give us a highlight. What stood out to you this season?
I think the biggest thing for me was the fans returning to stadiums. Although at such a low capacity inside the ground, you could just see how passionate people were to be back in the ground, and hopefully we can see some bigger crowds next year.
Jesse, what about yourself, mate? Season highlight?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised you haven't mentioned it yet, boys. I mean, Chris Wood.
Burnley player of the season.
Burnley's player of the season, Players player of the season, and top goal scorer. Thanks, lads. So, I mean, it's just great to see Woody doing well and Wood rising.
We should claim him just like Pavlova. He's honorary Australian.
Russell Crowe.
give him a ruse jumper, eh? It's great to see him do well, and he particularly had a very good second half of the season, and of course a couple of moments. The Alisson header was pretty epic. It'd be hard to go past that for a long time. And just a quick mention, you mentioned Leeds before, Tommie. Just seeing a team with a different style of play. I mean, I know that if you follow the Championship last year and the year before that, people were familiar with their style, but I hadn't really watched much of Leeds before this year, and it was just refreshing to see teams have a go against other opposition. I thought, particularly that win against City was pretty epic as far as just the way that they set up and Bielsa's tactics. So it was pretty cool to watch them this season.
Andy and George, we'll throw to you guys next. What highlights of the season?
I mean, for me, and part of this obviously comes from that never-ending cycle of football, but just there was a few weeks of that epic levels of non-defending, the culmination of that is obviously that weekend where Liverpool go down at Villa, and the other one was the
Leicester and City.
And Man U smashed Southampton as well, and then there was a gap of 8 weeks there where there was each week there was at least a 4-0 or a 5-1 from October to December. So just general fun matches to watch.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss having football on every single day of the week. It was just, you're in this blurred, weird zone where it's Wednesday. Is there a game on? Yeah, there's 4 games on.
Yeah.
But it's been a good fun watch, and I think the other one I would say is all the managers, all the manager movements. It's been pretty crazy. I don't have the number on me about who's how many ins and outs there've been and how many there will be in the off season, but seems like one of those seasons where there are lots of chopping and changing. So
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be a classic Premier League season without a Mourinho sacking or appointment, and we did get that with his sacking at Tottenham towards the end. Of the
can't
season.
wait for season 2 of their Amazon documentary.
Yeah, it should be wild. And then season 3 with the Return of the King when Hodge comes back. Speaking of lowlights, boys, let's shout out a few lowlights. What didn't you love this season, Tommie?
Well, on the topic of Spurs, I hated how quickly Spurs came down from sort of the heights of the beginning of the season, where like Kane and Son were just sort of unstoppable, and I feel like it only lasted about 2 months before the wheels sort of started to come off. So that's a low light for me.
I can't tell. Has he been ironic? Has he been ironic? I can't tell.
Well, normally Spurs is Jose's team. At least they're good for a while. Whereas this time around, like as you said in the intro, Colby, like he only lasted into a second season. There was no third season. There was no good season where he's actually good.
He's truly mastered the art of self-destruction now. Like, he's much more efficient.
Yep. As incisive as a Jose Mourinho counter-attack, such was the fate of his seasons, just up and back very quickly. Damo, what was your low light for this season, mate?
Pretty obvious low light was Sheffield United's season, and probably even worse than that was Chris Wilder leaving the club. I think even getting relegated, if Wilder was sticking around, I'd be a little bit happier. But, that's probably my low light is Chris Wilder leaving Sheffield United.
Jesse?
Yeah, one of mine was also watching Sheffield United die a slow death. So I have to agree. There was the fact that we knew who was going to get relegated a long way in advance was a little bit of a anticlimax, particularly with like Fulham had a little bit of a renaissance and then they just fell away as well. So I think those teams, like we all talked about, and we'll talk about it later in the show, about the West Brom. I think most of us thought West Brom was going to go straight back down. So there was a little bit predictable in that sense. A little bit of an anticlimax, I'd say, with the relegation. But VAR, some of the offside decisions were just diabolical and really, really spoiled quite a few games. Obviously, there was some for my team, but plenty for other teams. I can't answer that question, Sal. That's
we just had a listener question from friend of the pod, Sal Talks Soccer, on our YouTube comments, asking why Damo is wearing a turtleneck. Is he going on a skiing vacation in the Alps after the show? Damo, go on, Andy.
I did have one quick. I was going to wait for later in the pod because it's just now that it's back on topic again. But I queried whether it was actually a turtleneck or is it a skivvy. I don't know what the technical specifications of it are. Is it a full-on snow expedition outfit or is it a the white wiggle?
Or is it a snood? Is it a snood?
Yeah,
is that a training ground snood?
It's a manager's snood.
I don't know the terminology, guys, but it's warm and comfortable. So let's move on.
It depends where you are, isn't it? It's sort of like, if you're one side of the border, it's a palmy, and if you're on another side of the border, it's a palmar. So, back to you out there, listeners, to just really define, what's a skivvy.
What is Damo wearing?
Damo's kit.
Damo's outfit of the week. Other lowlights, Andy and George. Anything from you about this season?
Other than Damo's skivvy. Tommie mentioned the very sudden fall of Spurs. A couple of teams had a similar high, burned very brightly, and then flames extinguished very quickly. Everton come to mind, as did Southampton. Yeah, Villa as well. So, sad for those teams. The other obvious one on this is the Super League debacle, which I'm sure someone else was going to pick up on. So.
Yeah, what a shit show that was. Like, just a weekend of just like that. I mean, that weekend on social media was just absolute chaos. I mean, in addition to all of the football midweek that nobody could keep up with and nobody knew what day it was or who was playing who, you just had this Super League news just like tornado through for 48 hours or whatever, and then just sort of left a path of destruction in its wake.
I think there was Arsenal versus Burnley, which isn't exactly a blockbuster game at the best of times anyway. But I was watching that and I was sort of sitting on my phone as it was starting to unfold, and I could not give a fuck about the game that was in front of me. I was just engrossed in social media, like watching this all unfold. I couldn't believe it. And
well, Arsenal Burnley would have been so captivating, Tommie. I don't know how you saw yourself away.
That would have been a top of the table clash.
Oh, boys, let's talk about some of the players now. Let's have a quick word on who you rate as your signing of the season, your new signing of the season, and we'll start again with you, Tommie.
All right, mate, I'm going to go with West Ham's own Vladimir Soufal. I thought he was pretty immense signing for West Ham, turned a bit of a troublesome position over the last few years into a real strength. The dude just never stops running. He's just got an immense engine, and he's just tough as nails as well. So great player to watch, and I just hope he stays fit and has a great Euros as well for the Czech Republic.
Are the fans just going to recycle Sofiane Boufal's song for him?
Ooh.
To the tune of that James Blunt song, your Kufal, it's true.
Well, I don't think there were many actual songs being sung when fans actually were allowed back into the ground, but I wouldn't be surprised if that one does come out next season.
Good. I hope they do. It'd be a missed opportunity if they didn't. Signing of the season, Andy and George. Let's go back to you. What do you reckon?
For me, it's Ruben Diaz. Obvious choice, but not just for the personal awards he's picked up, but the way he's transformed that back line, and he's more than anything the reason why Stones has found himself back in the team and playing well. But and when you look at him, plays leader and sort of captain and all but name, and they've finally filled that Vincent Kompany gap that was Vincent Kompany shaped hole that was missing. So.
And he's 24.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Let's face it, he's going to be City captain at some point as well, isn't he?
Yeah, sure.
The other one I had aside from Diaz is probably Thomas Tuchel. Came in late, made a pretty big impact on Chelsea and steered them to the top four. Which wasn't looking likely during the season. And the other one I would say is Edward Mendy came in, I think, probably 3 weeks into the season when, or a little bit more when Kepa was having some serious wobbles and he shored up the back line and I think kept a record number of clean sheets. So, yeah, I think those are my ranks.
Jesse, who you got?
Yeah, I had Ruben Dias as well. He's I was actually
Mayo.
Yeah, I was surprised actually how quickly he just slotted in. It was ridiculous. He did so well to jump into a bottom of the table team that was struggling, a manager that was struggling.
Very limited budget.
Very limited budget. Really was up against it, and obviously the academy there's pretty shit too. So he's done really well with the facilities he had. So good on him. But a special mention has to go to Rafinha. Hopefully soon to be a Liverpool player, Rafinha. He was fantastic for Leeds all season and just a joy to watch, and he came over from Sporting as well. So he's a bit of an ex-Sporting player. So enjoyed watching him.
By definition, an ex-Sporting player.
100%.
Damo signing of the season, mate.
The low-hanging fruit was Ruben Diaz, as it was spoken about, but I think the other one that I had noted down was Jesse Lingard. I think he came in on loan in January and made an absolute player of himself in the second half of the season, and it's going to be interesting to see where he goes from here, because obviously he's put up his transfer value a bit, and I don't think he really fits in at Man United. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here.
You could just see the table. You could just see Tommie's table just rise as you see it.
I'll tell you who wasn't signing of the season was Rhian Brewster, but we'll get to that later.
Let's get to that now, Damo. We're going to talk through a few spuds of the season, and it sounds like you've given us yours.
Go on, Tommie.
Go on, Tommie.
Before we move on, I do want to throw out Emi Martinez, the new Villa keeper.
Yeah.
He was signed on a permanent 12 months ago, so I want to give that as a shout out as well because he was pretty transformational for that Villa side as well. Sorry, keep going.
Good shout, Tommie.
Yeah, so we'll go back to my spud of the season. I've already mentioned his name. I don't want to mention his
again.
Don't want to mention his name too many more times. Rhian Brewster. I said all along he was never the answer, and I'll talk a little bit more about him later when we do team reviews.
Mate, how do you think he's going to go in the championship, though?
Probably score 0 goals again, for all I care.
Fair enough.
Tommie, while we've got you there, mate, you spud of the season?
Geez, there was a few this year. Hard to go past Lampard, though. I mean, he had just
Get the
so
filter
many.
out.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to give you a right of reply, George, but keep going, Tommie.
Look, we all know how talented. Well, we've now seen how talented that Chelsea side was, and he was basically had them mid-table, and for them to be mid-table, and obviously Tuchel showed how good they can be. But I thought, just Lampard was shown to be the fraud that he is.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit harsh because
He was 10th.
He did pretty well in the first season. It's just he couldn't. Someone basically poured the puzzle out on the table, and he just couldn't. He couldn't arrange the pieces properly under
George,
pressure.
this isn't season review from last season, though.
he couldn't arrange the puzzle because of his fat hands.
It's not a 1,000-piece. It's also not a 1,000-piece jigsaw. It's an 11-piece trial puzzle. Like, just put the best ones in. That's fine.
I mean, and then Tuchel comes in and starts playing 4-dimensional chess. And you've got one end of the spectrum to the other.
All fair, but I think you're being a bit harsh. But he helped the team get to a Champions League. Gave the guys a number of young guys to start, and they're doing quite well.
Is Frank's medal in the post, George? Or
yeah, I think so. I think he gets one. He definitely gets one.
Andy, who was your spud of the season, mate?
It's tempting to stay with Chelsea and go with Timo, just pure lack of return.
Do it.
But I think there's a greater spud on the other side of London. It's got to be William. I don't know I don't remember seeing William play for Arsenal since Christmas. So
he got 3 assists in like the first 4 games, and Arsenal fans like, oh, why would you let him go? And I don't think he's played 90 minutes since.
I don't think he had an assist since then either. So and he's there on big money. And just when they thought they were like free of the weight of Ozil's contract and in a rebuild stage, they've now got another useless bloke there on big money. So
for a couple more years.
I read a tweet today that said that Willian rejected a 2-year contract from Chelsea because Arsenal convinced him that they'd be challenging to win the Champions League within 3 years. Whoops.
Like what is it? So to coincide with the time that his contract expires.
Yeah.
And he's no longer there.
Oh, you never know with Arteta at the wheel, boys. But Jesse, who is your spud of the season?
It's a bit of a two-way spud, if that's even possible. One of those rare double spuds that you dig out of the ground. It was Matt Doherty, but also Nelson Semedo, who both managed to fuck up their respective positions for different clubs. One went out, one went in, and they were both utter rubbish all season. I know Wolves fans are particularly pissed off with Semedo because, you could sort of see what you're going to get from him when Barca got absolutely tonked the year before, and Semedo was the one spending the most time picking the ball out of the net. Should have given them a bit of a clue what they were getting. So he was an absolute blowout for Wolves. And Doherty, I don't know what the hell happened to him.
Jose, maybe? Yeah, Jose, like you can't defend. You're not.
The shackles were on.
Yeah.
He went to the Tottenham Hotspuds, and that was the end of him. So I had a rare double spud, boys.
All right, boys. Well, look, plenty happened in this season. Obviously, City won it. In the Champions League spots, we had United, Liverpool, and Chelsea rounded out the top 4. Also playing European football in the Europa League are Leicester and West Ham, Tommie's own West Ham. And in, I think, the qualifying spots are Spurs with a good crack at European football next season.
League, or is it
the Conference League, the UECL? Yep. Conference League.
Also played on a Thursday night, boys. So it's going to be pretty
against the might of Kazakhstani second division clubs.
Can't wait for that. Most of us picked Fulham and West Brom to get relegated as they did, as well as City to win the league by and large. I think we picked that. But boys, what about our other predictions? I think it's time to check the tapes.
Oh, fuck.
Here we go.
So I've got this nice and low tech again on my phone, boys. So I'm just gonna play you a few little choice clips.
Can I revise my season lowlights? I think it's coming up.
The first one is going to be George. So here we go.
I think I've been giving this season preview for the last probably 3 to 5 months, just with all the signings we've been making, and I was sort of looking forward to this season. So it's pretty exciting. Throw everything you knew about Chelsea out the window last year. This is all new. This is just a football revolution.
So Lampard's not going to play the kids?
Lampard's playing the kids, and he's playing the superstar kids that we've now signed. So, it doesn't matter. As I said, don't worry about last season. Don't worry about the lack of defence. Don't worry about the lack of goals. This season's just going to be a goal fest. You're going to have to watch every Chelsea game because they're going to be putting 5 or 6 in every week. So last season we finished 4th. This season,
Jeez, here he is. Look on Andy's face just then.
I think that's probably enough about that one, George. And no listeners, you weren't listening to a dodgy audio quality version of George's predictions. For next season. Those were George's predictions for this season.
Best team in Europe, boys. Best team in Europe.
5 or 6 every week. 5 or 6 every week.
Might concede 5 or 6 every week.
And we've got another one, and this next one comes from Tommie.
Personnel, you got like Jack Cork, for example. You take him out of that side, and I think that side would kind of struggle. And if you lose a player like that for 6 months, it could be the difference between mid-table and possibly getting involved in relegation talk.
Tommie, is this like how you said that Jack Wilshere was the key to West Ham's success last year?
Digging up old wounds already.
Speaking of injured players.
So yes, Tommie, that was your prediction that Jack Cork was the key to Burnley's success, without whom Burnley would be in a relegation battle. We can't confirm or deny whether that was the case at all this season.
I think he was injured most of the season as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, I love hearing about it.
I love that you're digging up old wounds again from 2 years ago about Jack Wilshere.
Double that up.
Should have just.
I thought I'd keep that in.
Should have just kept that Cork on ice, I think.
Fair's fair. I will give myself one. I had a couple of beauties, but I've picked out this one, boys.
One to watch, Patrick Bamford, boys. You wanted to hear about him. The Leeds striker scored 16 goals in their promotion-winning championship campaign last season, but a lot of pundits don't really rate him as Premier League quality, and maybe Bielsa doesn't either because he's got in Rodrigo.
So I was insinuating that Patrick Bamford may not be Premier League quality last season. I think I went on to give him a bit more of a balanced rap than that, I will say. But I have been proven wrong. He's done very well in the Premier League this season, and I'll speak a bit more about him in my review of Leeds this season. But he's shown to be no Pookie for now. Next up, we've got one from Jesse actually.
But do you think that this could be sort of the year where Brewster sort of shows his presence at Liverpool?
He's good at penalties, I heard.
Oh, no.
He's really good at it, as you guys have seen recently. Brewster's. I don't want to see Brewster go on loan, Tommie. I'd like to see him stick around and get a chance because I actually think he's with a couple of games under his belt, he could be a real asset for us. I think he did a good job at Swansea and deserves to stay.
Premier League quality, Rhian Brewster.
That hurts two of us.
I've just lost count. I've lost count of all the goals you scored this season, boys.
All the penalties.
In penalties.
And I've got one for Damo here too, boys. We can't leave Damo out. And here he is.
It could be a relegation battle. Tommie mentioned it earlier, and I've sort of prepared myself that could be, the season coming. But I think a successful season for Sheffield United would be to finish mid-table. Again, I don't think they'll finish higher than 9th that they did last year, but who knows? No one predicted that last year. I'm going to predict them to finish 13th, so just outside the top half. I think that's probably about the level that they're at. And
Rip.
This is like a post-mortem.
I had to just share it around and fair's fair. Well, one for each of the boys. We're not going to check all of the tapes, but Andy, as much as he didn't feature on the pod much last season, I have managed to just pick out
a bit of a Jack Cork season.
Yeah, that's it. But not, more than a game hasn't been relegated. We're still here, so make that what you will. But Andy's take is here.
Ferran Torres, I think, is one to watch. Pep historically won't throw him straight into the lineup, I don't think, but. Again, having seen a bit of him playing for Valencia last year, I think he's made for the Premier League.
Ferran Torres, that was as bad as we could get on you, Andy. So I think you got away with one there. Ferran Torres for his 7 goals.
Yeah.
But yes, listeners, you can hear more excellent and accurate predictions like that on our Premier League season preview podcast when that drops a week or two before next season's Premier League season. But coming up next, let's get into our team season reviews. So, boys, we're going to go through each of the teams now. We're going to try and keep it to no more than a couple of minutes on each team. Let's see how we go with that. We'll run through some things like where they finished, what made their season or let them down, whether they underachieved or overachieved, whether anyone's stocks are rising or falling, and what they need to do for success next season. So we went in alphabetical order. In our season preview, so we'll go backwards. We'll mix it up, going back through them. So we'll kick off with Wolves and Jesse.
Yeah, so Wolves. Yeah, Wolves were an interesting one this year because they were absolutely decimated after Jimenez's injury, which was a horrible injury. But it just seemed to have a ripple effect throughout the entire squad and the team. From that point, you'll recall last year they finished 7th, or this year they finished 13th, and it doesn't quite reflect how tumultuous it was for Wolves. As I said before, you had the car crash at the back that was Semedo, but apart from that, they just weren't their normal, reliable defensive shape. They tried to play 4 at the back sometimes, which Nuno was doing his best to try and tinker and fix the problems, but I think a real low for them was when they got spanked pretty heavily in the derby against West Brom at one stage of the season. That was pretty hard, I think, for Wolves fans. And at that point, I think, was the point where they're starting to think that they might be in a relegation battle. So I guess finishing 13th isn't the end of the world for them if you think about it. But they've just lost their coach. He's brought in half of Portugal with him, and then he's left. So it's almost like, I don't want to use American military metaphors, but it is almost like invading a country and just leaving it completely.
Gee, that's grim for a Sunday night.
Completely unequipped with no hospitals or schools. But basically, Wolves are now in a position where this is going to be absolutely critical what they do next, because he was not just their coach, he was probably their talisman in a way, and he brought them up. And the fact that they parted ways, I guess maybe jump before he was pushed, sort of thing. I think it's going to be a really interesting situation for them, and whoever they hire and the manager merry-go-round will sort of dictate how they go next season. But to be honest, when we get to our predictions in a few weeks, I'm not really sure what we can make of Wolves until we know who the manager is going to be. So yeah, that's sort of a bit of a summary of where they're at. I think everyone sort of saw how much the Jimenez injury impacted their season.
Thanks for that, Jesse. On to more positive news. West Ham with Tommie.
Yeah, mate, my pleasure to do the West Ham review this season. Last year, they finished 16th on 39 points, just escaping relegation. This year, they finished 6th with 65 points, so a whopping 26-point turnaround from the previous season, and their best finish since 1999, so incredible season for the Hammers. This season was really made through hard work and team spirit. Man United also managed to come back from a whole bunch of like losing positions this year, and West Ham also showed a whole bunch of like really incredible spirit to come back from losing positions or just tough periods in matches. In terms of they definitely overachieved. That goes without saying, I think. But
they won the Everton Cup, Tommie. Just occurred to me.
What are you talking about? They're top 6. That's finishing above the Everton Cup.
What happens when you finish above the Everton Cup? Do you still get the cup?
No, you're just top 6 then. You're a big 16
then. To get the cup.
So technically, Arsenal won the Everton Cup.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
In terms of stocks that are rising and falling, I think there are a lot of players that really stood up this season. If there's one player in particular that stood out, though, it was Thomas Soucek, who we haven't mentioned so far on the pod. He had another incredible season and playing alongside Declan Rice, who, again, has just continues to grow and grow into just, I guess, an immense young English footballer. What do they need for success for next season, though? They need to move on some of the deadwood. Some of you might remember a footballer called Felipe Anderson. He's still at the club. Lanzini's I know, right? Felipe Anderson's still hanging around. They got rid of Allaire mid-season. Lanzini's still hanging around on pretty decent money as well. So I think they'll be looking to replace some of them with some players that are sort of maybe more along the lines of David Moyes type players over the summer. But I think I'm not concerned at all about Declan Rice leaving. I think we're entering sort of Zaha territory with Declan Rice, where he's worth more to West Ham than any other team is willing to pay, and so he's sort of priced out of a move.
Tommy, would you be confident enough to buy a Declan Rice top?
No.
Replace your Haller top.
No, my Arnautovic top.
Yeah, Arnautovic.
So, Tommy, you said Moyes type players. Does that mean Marwan Fellaini's coming back from China?
Well, no. So do you guys remember that?
There we go.
So Arnautovic might actually be rejoining the club from China. And also, do you guys remember that the David Luiz lookalike from Spartak Moscow? I think his name was Kroll. There's rumored that because apparently he's Czech and he knows Soucek and Soufal as well. So
it's going to be another Wolves scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So
Czech Republic versus Portugal.
Don't do it, Tommy.
We'll have to get in like a Czech coach or something in a few years' time because no one will know how to speak English there. But
well, Moisey's pretty good at learning foreign languages, though, isn't he?
Yeah.
We'd have to check the tapes, I think, to go back to any of his Real Sociedad press conferences.
I reckon there's some good ones of him with some elementary Spanish in those from those days, if memory serves. But Tommy, you're up next as well with West Brom.
Yeah, mate, we'll make this one quick because let's face it, they finished top of the championship the year before, and this year everyone pretty much expected them to get relegated, and of course they did, and they were only really saved by Sheffield United's dreadful season by not finishing last. What made their season or let them down was probably a lack of signings pre-season, as their lack of Premier League quality sort of shone through, and also something that I could see some similarities with West Ham from a few years ago was that this was originally a Slaven Bilic team, and they were really lazy and didn't run a lot, and had all the hallmarks of West Ham from a few years ago as well. In terms of stocks that are rising or falling, well, there's probably only a few that were actually rising. Big Sam, obviously, he's finally been relegated now with a club, breaks his record, so his stocks have fallen. But in terms of players that are rising. Mateus Pereira, he showed that he can do it at the top level, scoring 11 goals. Sam Johnston and Conor Gallagher, also two players who I think probably put a decent foot forward this season. I think both of them would be playing in the Premier League next season. Next season, though, for West Brom, I think they'll probably be thereabouts for playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make an immediate return back to the Premier League, though. That's West Brom.
Thanks, Tommie. Damo, we'll go to you next with Tottenham. Hot Spuds.
Yeah, the Hot Spuds, we've spoken a bit about them already, is the Mourinho failed experiment. So I think that's kind of what let their season down. Obviously, they finished 7th in the Conference League, and Mourinho lost his job, as we know. And I think Tommie mentioned it earlier, is they started out the season so well. I think in December, people were talking about it being a 2-horse race between Liverpool and Spurs. And I mean, it was very, very early on, but, you know, they had a killer instinct, Son and Kane, very early on in the season. And they kind of just lost that after the new year. And then the wheels all began to fall off. And obviously we know what happened there with Mourinho leaving. I got some good stats for you here about Spurs, particularly about Harry Kane. He joins a couple of pretty exclusive clubs. He's only the 3rd player to have won the Golden Boot on 3 or more occasions. Can you guys name the other 2?
Shearer
is one. And the other one should be obvious.
Henry.
Arsenal.
Henry.
Yeah, there you go. And then he's also only the 3rd player to have won the Golden Boot and Playmaker Award in the same season. So the only other 2 players to do that were Andy Cole and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, and he's the first to do that in 22 years. So
Jimmy Floyd, your boy, George.
Yeah, my man.
So Harry Kane, although, and I think we mentioned it last week, Tommie, Jesse, and I, Harry Kane had an outstanding individual season, and Spurs still really struggled to hold on to 7th spot. So imagine where they would have been without him. Were they overachievers, underachievers? Definitely underachievers. They crumbled again, as Spurs are known to do. Whose stocks are rising? I think Højbjerg had a tremendous season. He proved that he does an unglamorous and kind of understated job, and he could probably do a job for any of the big teams in the Premier League or Europe. So I think another player who had a great season, it's hard to say his stocks are rising, but Bale bounced back from a couple of horrible seasons at Madrid to have, I think, the best goals and assist ratio per 90 minutes in the Premier League this season. So he'll be particularly important if and when Kane leaves. He'll have to play that role up front.
If they keep hold of him.
They keep him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if Kane leaves, then Bale's sure to stay. And I think that's kind of the deal.
Boys, I heard a rumor that Bale wants to retire from football altogether at the age of 32 or whatever he is to pursue a golf career.
Wouldn't surprise me. He wouldn't make it in golf, though.
Here we golf.
we golf again. And stocks falling on Bergwijn had a pretty horrible season. Lamela, Lo Celso, all kind of big names at Spurs that really failed to fire all year. They could all be potentially on the chopping block, which moves me to, what do they need to do for next season? Obviously, there's all this talk about Kane leaving. I think that's the last thing they want, is they want to avoid the Magnificent Seven situation when they sold Bale and bought in all these new players for the money. I think if Kane leaves, they're kind of looking down the barrel of an exactly the same situation, and it's a rebuild from there. And I think there's only failure, or there's only a few hard years at Spurs if that's the case. I think they need to keep Kane if they want to keep this momentum going. And
they need a manager as well.
Yeah.
They need a manager.
What do they sort out first, the manager or Kane?
You would assume the manager, but knowing Daniel Levy, he'll get any penny he can for Kane, or every penny he can for Kane. And if someone puts in an offer, he'll go. But for me, I think they need to get rid of some of the deadweight players, some of the players like Lo Celso, Lamela, that they can still get money for that haven't been playing well. And they need to bring in proven Premier League players. They brought in all these players over the last 4 to 5 years, and Højbjerg's really the only one who's been a proven Premier League player. You can say Doherty as well, but we spoke about what happened there. But I think that's the avenue they need to go down, is kind of buy players off smaller clubs.
Sounds like Spurs have got their work cut out for them if they end up losing Kane. Could be, I mean, you know, if they're finishing sort of like 6th or 7th or whatever it is now, yeah, there could be a little while in the wilderness if they have to do a rebuild. But yeah, we'll watch that and we'll cover it on the pod, of course. I'm up next, boys, with Southampton, and this won't take long either because while they were solid in patches, overall it was a bit of a meh season for Southampton. They ended up in 15th after finishing in 11th and sort of impressing us last season. What made their season? Well, not really much because they were let down by the lack of Danny Ings' goals in this season. The season before, he played every game and scored 22 goals, but this season he only featured in 29 matches for a return of 12 goals. And while Shea Adams looked more settled and chipped in along with Ward-Prowse with a few goals, it hurt not to have their main man firing. So they're pretty much underachievers this season. They had some players who didn't fire, like Salisu, Walcott and Redmond, who looked like they were going to be decent. I mean, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And they also had some players who need another season to recover form or fitness. Like Shea Adams, you know, it looks like he's adjusting to the Premier League, and Musa Djenepo looks like he probably needed another half season to come back from that ACL injury. But overall, it's not good enough for this squad and manager as well. Which takes us on to whose stocks are falling, because you'd have to say that Hasenhüttl's stocks are falling after all of that. He's had this team threatening to finish in the top half for a couple of seasons now, and he just hasn't been able to do it. And he's taken another step back this season, not to mention being on the end of another 9-0 spanking to United. So, yeah, not really good enough for Hasenhüttl, who was, you know, every time he gets it into the top 10 at any point in the season, he gets linked to all these big jobs, and look where they are now. So Southampton need to be more than the sum of their parts, essentially, for next season. And importantly, they need to keep Danny Ings fit. So Southampton fans, start praying.
I think Ings will be off to Spurs probably. So, yeah.
Yeah, it could be another injury-prone mercurial striker.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he'll fit right in.
Fits the bill.
Yep. It sounds about right. Up next, Damo with Sheffield.
Yeah, where do I start?
Cool.
Finished dead last, as we've spoken about. They finished on 23 points, which is 31 points less than last season, which is pretty incredible. Obviously, Wilder leaving was a big part of the season. What let them down this year? I mean, it's easy to pinpoint the beginning of Sheffield United's downfall as when the COVID outbreak hit and empty stadiums became a thing. But it's also easy to blame that. Every team had to deal with it. I just think Sheffield United adapted the worst out of everyone. So, you know, it's not really an excuse, but, you know, I think the downfall this season was probably mainly due to three things. And they were, first of all, poor transfers, which have been blamed on Chris Wilder. He was apparently the be all end all of the transfer business. So you can blame that on him, maybe. Injuries being, just absolutely decimated that ever-present back three, which is so important to Sheffield United. I think we played 2 games all season with our starting 3 back line. So that's a huge deal, as well as losing Henderson was a massive deal, and Ramsdale wasn't really a great replacement in terms of him. And mainly the inability to put chances away. This season, Sheffield United actually created more chances per 90 minutes than they did last year. Unfortunately, just couldn't score any goals. And I think between the 4 strikers that were on the list at the start of the season, I think they scored 12 goals between them. And that was with David McGoldrick scoring 7. So it's a pretty bad season, pretty poor return from the strikers. There's not much more you can say about how poor their season was, apart from the fact that they were the first team in Premier League history to not have a win by New Year's Day. It's a pretty telling statistic. It's weird whether they're overachievers or underachievers. I think a lot of people would say they overachieved last season, and this was kind of their real level. I think there's probably some truth to that, but there's also, you could say, they underachieved this season. I think everyone knew what the squad could do, but unfortunately, it just didn't come together for one reason or another. And and the kind of reasons I mentioned earlier. So, whose stocks are rising? Definitely Sander Berg. I don't think he'll stick around. I think another Premier League club or European team will pick him up. He's too good for the Championship. But I also think another player whose stocks are rising is Daniel Jefferson. He's a 17-year-old academy product. Was born in Canada. He's been at the club for about 4 years, I think now. He finished the season as the first choice number 9. He started the last 2 games, came off the bench in the 2 before that. And his highlight was obviously scoring on his full debut in a 1-0 win against Everton. So he's been rewarded with a first-team contract, and I think he'll push on next year in the Championship and hopefully score a lot of goals. We spoke about Rhian Brewster. Stocks are falling. I don't know what the club does with him. They can't get any money for him. How he does in the Championship, who knows? He'll probably do better, or you'd hope he'd do better than he did this year. He played 30 games in all competitions this year, 27 in the league, and didn't score a goal. So you'd hope he at least gets a goal next year. And the other player I think stocks are falling a lot was Lys Mousset, who proved a real effective outlet last year when Sheffield United wanted to play on the counter and sit in that low block. He had an injury at the start of the year and he never really seemed to recover. It looked like he lacked a bit of pace and he just failed to fire up front. So it's another player that don't really know what to do with at the club. In terms of success next season, I think getting the manager right was a big deal. They've appointed Slavica Jokanovic, who I don't know, you guys probably don't know who he is. I didn't know who it was, to be honest.
He's bounced around the Championship a fair bit.
He has, yeah.
He was the Fulham manager when they were terrible, like 18 months ago.
Yeah, so he also got Watford promoted a few years ago in the Championship, so he's got a bit of a history with the Championship. He's most recently been working in the Saudi Pro League, so it's a good resume. But he seems like exactly what fits Sheffield United's psyche. He's a no-nonsense kind of hard man player. He played for Chelsea. I don't know if you know that, George. But I think the key to their promotion is getting the squad together, starting the season really strong, getting a few wins. That'll just build the confidence of the team, build the confidence of the fans. And I think if Sheffield United get off to a flying start in the Championship, they'll be hard to catch. So that's kind of my deal for success next year. But I'm just like last year, preparing myself for a pretty dismal campaign next year. So yeah, I'm kind of resigned to the fact that we won't even make the playoffs. But we'll see how we go.
But we will get a lot more Championship chat in the pod.
Exactly.
So.
Important for the pod.
Yeah, I could make a whole pod about Sheffield United season, but we'll move on.
Just Damo on monologue for an hour each week talking about Sheffield United.
I could.
It was a eulogy that's been coming for about 4 months.
He had to get it out. He had to get it out.
Cleansing.
I just
get
it
out.
I just hope you feel
Boys, I feel so much better.
I just want to say one thing about Sheffield United. They never got spanked the whole season, and they were always in a lot of games.
Until Heckingbottom came in. And here's a stat for you. Chris Wilder, in 4 years at the club, never lost by more than 3 goals. The week Heckingbottom took over, they lost 5-0.
They remind me a little bit of Newcastle in the A-League at the moment. And hear me out, in that like they're not getting tonked in games. They're consistently losing by like 1 goal, and they might lose 2-1 or something like that. But they're never involved in a shootout. And I guess if you're not scoring goals, you're not going to win a lot of matches, right?
Yeah, we stayed competitive for most part of the season, but being competitive is not good enough if you're not getting points. That's at the end of the day.
100%.
Team who did get enough points, boys. Newcastle. Don't know how they did it. Jesse, let us know.
It's the mystery. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Steve Bruce.
Never doubted him for a second.
Yeah. He's done it again, boys. He's done it again. Last year, they finished 13th. This year, they finished 12th. Some would call that progress. I would. I'm just amazed that here we are talking about Newcastle in 12th after following this season and even literally the last few weeks of the season. This didn't look like it was possible. St. Maximum coming back from injury was just absolutely monumental for them because they had no attacking outlet with Wilson injured for a big part of the season. He still managed to score 12 goals for the season, I think it was, Callum Wilson. So still, did a really, really good contribution when he was fit. But he was out for a long time, so they just really struggled for goals. Their defence was leaky, and they were very defensive. But I don't know how much of the Newcastle games you guys watched in the second half of the season, but they definitely started to try and play a little bit more expansively when they had the ball, and actually it had some good results. They had a good win at Everton, and they did obviously a good job against Liverpool in a couple of weeks to go. Joe Willock coming across from Arsenal was a huge addition for them. So that's going to be crossing over the next season. One of the big questions is that Arsenal will want him back. So the question is, does he want first-team football at Newcastle, or does he want to try and fight into the Arsenal side? And I think at the moment, the way he's been going with Newcastle, I wonder if he'd want to just go back there for another season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the contract negotiations there. As far as stocks rising, St. Maximum, when he was fit, was just ridiculously good. I thought he was impressive, but always injury-ravaged at the first part of the season. But the end of the season, he started just taking on entire teams by himself.
He's probably one of the best dribblers I've seen.
We haven't really had that this season, apart from thinking about Damo Traore last season. So we haven't really had a play like that. And when he came back, it just was so noticeable that he had so much confidence, and it kind of the rest of the team pick up on that. And you had players like Almiron and even Joelinton who have been really sort of unreliable for Newcastle. Even they started chipping in with some goals in the second half of the season. So credit to Newcastle, credit to Bruce. They have done it again. Where they go next season is the big question. If they can actually make a couple of astute signings like a Willock, like those kind of players, they might actually be able to push on. But imagine if they got 11th next year, boys. They just went up one place per year. That's progress.
It's the Steve Bruce way, boys. Tommie, you're up next to talk us through the United way for this season.
Oh, the United way. So interesting season, I guess, for Man United. They finished comfortably second this year, never really in doubt. 8 points better than last year's third place finish. And although I guess some of the teams around them started this season, obviously Liverpool, who we'll get to in a bit, but obviously that you'd think that's a good season for Man United. But I was in sort of two minds about whether or not they've overachieved or underachieved. They came second, but really the squad didn't really develop that much more. Greenwood, he seemed to have sort of stagnated a little bit. Dan James didn't really come on at all either. Cavani, I think, was probably the difference between them finishing third and second this season. So,
Tommie, I saw a stat during the week. I don't know whether you've got this in your notes, but you were sort of just saying, I don't know whether United finishing second, I can't get a read on how good that was. I read a stat that United's 74 points that they got this season would have got them in the past 5 seasons or something. They would have finished between third and sixth, sort of in that bracket with that amount of points. And that just sort of goes to show you how the other teams, their competition really fared this season.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point, because it always felt a little bit strange that they were in second and they were sort of comfortably second. So, that's a good point. Thanks for pointing that out, Colby. One other thing that I wanted to mention, I sort of already alluded to it a little bit, was about Man United's spirit and their ability to come back from losing positions. They actually won 31 points from losing positions this year. And I watched a lot of football this season, particularly in the second half of the season. And often Man United were terrible in the first half. Either they'd go behind, or they just wouldn't look like they were in the game, and then they would be absolutely incredible for the second half, or maybe even just 30 minutes in the second half where they would score 2 or maybe 3 goals and just blow a team away. And they often weren't playing very well for 90 minutes, and they were only really having 30 minutes of quality football each week. So again, a strange season for Man United in that sense. Stocks that are rising, I have to say Ole, he's probably done a pretty decent job this year, and I would say his stocks are rising. I'd have to say that I underestimated how they would finish this season. Luke Shaw's resurgence was obviously massive, and I think a lot of neutrals probably enjoyed him his return to form after watching him break his leg in the Champions League a couple of years ago, and then just getting slammed by Mourinho. So it was a bit of a heartwarming thing, as far as even the most ardent Man United haters would go. And Cavani obviously was a player who I mentioned before, who probably proved the difference between maybe third or fourth and second for them. But he proved a lot of doubters wrong as well, I think. So I think they'll be glad to hold on to him for at least another 12 months. The biggest fall, though, was probably De Gea, who was even sort of unseated as the undisputed number one at Man United, with Dean Henderson getting more than his fair share of games as the Man United goalkeeper. So what do they need for next season, though? Look, they probably need another centre-back. They probably need another right-back. I'm not convinced still by Wan-Bissaka that he is the long-term solution for them, because if Man United want to be challenging for the title, I just don't think Wan-Bissaka is the answer for them. And probably they're going to need a new manager if they want to be ultimately successful, but that's probably a whole other discussion for another day.
You just talked him up, Tommie.
Yeah, Tommie,
no.
you love you some Ole.
Yeah.
Ollie's at the wheel.
Ole. No, and that's the thing. I think this is as good as it gets for Ole at Man United. I don't think he's going to win them titles. We saw basically he sort of fluffed his lines a little bit at in the Europa League final. I don't think he made a substitution until the 80th minute. So I think this is as good as it gets for Ole at Man United.
Get the fat filter out, boys.
There you go, boys. This is not just a review pod; it's predictions, and he's just throwing that prediction out there. So, yeah, very disappointing. I think the other person I'd throw in there as well, Tommie, is Fred. As long as Fred is in that team, I don't think they win a title. He's absolute trash.
Well, I actually think he had a really good season. I think this was sort of finally we saw why he got signed.
I was going to say Fred. I think Fred was one of their best in the back part of the season.
Let's pile on to Jesse.
Did they win the title?
Tommie, you mentioned this was why Fred got signed, but have you got any thoughts of why Debate was signed? Because
how did we miss that? How did we not touch on this in the flops of the season?
James Van Der Beek was actually going to be one of my spuds of the season as well.
That's so harsh. Like I've heard a lot of podcasts and a lot of pundits saying that Van Der Beek was a spud. Like the poor bloke's just
didn't even play, did he?
And ripped onto the bench. He didn't get a chance.
I think he played. I think he had like 10 starts in all competitions. So you're right. Like it's absolutely not his fault, but it's still just
on him. I'm just like, why'd they sign him?
It totally didn't make any sense,
to flex. Yeah,
pretty much.
It's just like the FIFA career mode when it's like transfer deadline day and you've got like 40 grand left there and you're like, oh, may as well spend it on something.
and that is Man United's problem in a nutshell. They're just playing FIFA career mode, aren't they?
Yep. And well, speaking of managers, managers who can't win European Cup finals, let's go to the bald fraud himself and Pep's Manchester City, Andy.
Yeah, look, in terms of the Premier League, obviously great season for them, winning the league, which a lot of us did call. And you have to remember they did, notwithstanding how well they've played and some of the football they've put on, the team's play has dramatically shifted from last year when they were obviously great with the ball, but shaky defensively. Like they've now become a very solid defensive team. Last night, notwithstanding. And we've got to remember they put on a pretty incredible run. It's easy to look at that team and the manager and say they should, either win or, battle with Liverpool with their eyes closed every year. But you've got to remember at one point, I think towards Christmas, they were in 8th and they were 8 points behind Liverpool. Their season's really a story of turning that around and becoming much more solid and just consistency when other teams like Leicester and probably couldn't keep it going for the duration. But so what made their season look as previously, it's a sort of collective goal scoring effort and sorting out the defence. But if we were to look at who's, and this is part of that story, if you look at when we talk about their stocks are rising or falling in that team, Diaz is obviously mentioned because he sorts out the defence and he improves everyone else, including Stones. But I thought guys like Mahrez and Gundogan, who had an incredible run in the middle of the season, sort of brought themselves back into the lineup. And the story of City season is not just the starting lineup playing well, but it's the guys that step in. And it no longer looks like a best 11 with guys on the bench. The 11 could be any combination of 15 or 16 players. So that's where they're squad. Yeah.
I don't know if you've got a few notes for stocks are falling, but I'd give Bilver a shout. He hasn't done anything since he wouldn't clap Liverpool in the Guard of Honour.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think he had a bad season. He didn't have the year he did last year, but then
he's no Phil Foden.
Well, exactly, but Foden's the one that's stepped in, so they haven't missed Bilver for one reason or another between the two players.
After the Champions League final, maybe we're about to see Bilver be reinvented as a holding midfielder.
I don't know, because the other two holding midfielders only one of them came on after 70 minutes. I don't know. For who's falling, I've got the only probably disappointing seasons are probably Sterling and Jesus, who we know I don't believe in. Sterling, I've denied him 3 times. And Sterling wasn't terrible, but again, he just was patchy and sort of not at the levels that they kind of need. So for what does City need to sort of keep at least the Premier League success going next season, they definitely need a striker, I think, because you can't.
Salah would fit in. Salah would fit in there, Andy. If you don't believe in Jesus, you can always get Mohammed over. So
I don't want another bloody goal. We've got Sterling. I don't need another tap in merchant. The other obvious place to sort that team out is Zinchenko. I think he's the left back role's the weak spot in the team.
Andy, did you mention Cancelo?
Yeah. What about him?
All right. Sorry. No. If you.
He was in my list of like Mahrez and Gundogan, who's like showing themselves they can actually be starting players as well. No, I might not have said it, but he was in my list, so you're right.
Right. There I was thinking I'd thrown out the false accusation, and you just hadn't said it.
The tapes are already being checked.
He's in all of our thoughts. But speaking of absent defenders, why don't we switch to Jesse and the team of absent defenders, which is Liverpool.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, to close the city, I was going to say John Stones had a fantastic season. Obviously, that was a lot to do with Dias. So, he made him a better defender, and he looked a much better defender all season. So that was a notable change there. With Liverpool guys, well, we've all seen it. A bit of a miraculous end of the season, a good start to the season, but the middle was just, it was the worst kind of sandwich you can imagine. Awful. After
like one of the bad sandwiches left at the 7-Eleven, just gone bad in the middle.
The tuna's soaked into the bread. You're halfway through, you realise it's tomato as well. That's also soaked into the bread. It's not fresh. It's been there for a few days. The best before date's passed. We've all been
oddly specific, Jesse.
Yeah. Who's buying tuna sandwiches from the supermarket?
Yeah, a real dicey operator.
There's always a short time between paydays. But with Liverpool, tough season. Obviously, I'm still not over Pickford basically cutting Van Dijk's leg in half and not getting any kind of retribution after that. I was pretty pissed off about that, but that was sort of a sign of things to come. Obviously, we had a lot of players out, but it's not just so much about the injuries. It's the fact that Damo mentioned it earlier. There are clubs in the Premier League, no doubt, who lean on supporters more than others. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be unsuccessful or successful with them or with them not around. But I think that Liverpool clearly in those games, which they might be able to get over with a 2-1 or a 1-0, just didn't have that extra man on the sidelines to get them across the line, and there were games like that one that snapped the winning streak that they lost against Burnley at home. I mean, really indicative of those sort of games where a crowd may have got them across the line, and they weren't able to do that. So what let them down was pretty obviously the fact that they lost some key personnel, pushing. They lost Brewster, which was hugely damaging for them. But you really got me there. I think the domino effect it had on the team was obviously you had Fabinho getting pulled into defence, and even though he did a good job when he was there, then our midfield was getting overrun, and we just Thiago, who's such a great player, just did not look like a great player for 3/4 of the season. So it had an impact on the entire team, and then you had players like Mane and those sort of players who just have been so remarkably consistent for us, looking like they're running out of gas. So the whole team started to look pretty gassed near the end of the year, which makes that last push for Champions League quite remarkable. I did not expect them to make the top 4. I think that's a little bit to do with Leicester shitting the bed, which we'll talk about shortly. But I think what made their season was making the top 4, because if you think about the transfer window coming up, the fact that they're even in the mix and that they can actually say to players, we've got Champions League next season and we're going to hopefully have some fit defenders this time, actually makes them a much more attractive prospect than they could have been. Stocks
fit defenders, Jesse. What are we going to do next season? What are Liverpool going to do? They've got 27 centre backs that are going to be coming back into fitness. What are they, we're going to have a Chelsea loan army situation. What's going on?
Kabaka's he's out by the look of it. So with Konate, he won't be Kabak. That's true. He's gone. So a bit of a shame for him, but he didn't really. He wasn't able to sort of solidify his position in the team. You've now got Kanata coming in from Red Bull Leipzig, so you're going to have potentially 3. You've got Gomez, him, and Van Dijk there. That potentially they could even change their shape at the back and play 3 at the back with 2 wing backs or something like that. So it is going to be interesting to see what Klopp wants to do. Is he's going to have to evolve, because teams clearly figured them out this year in different ways, and we always have trouble breaking down a low block. Every year. So hopefully we can start getting better at that. Overachievers in the team. I think Salah actually, amongst all the other players that were low on form, dragged us out of a few games. So it was good to see him keeping some kind of consistency. But underachievers, I mean, we still have your Caters and that can't get fit. I just think that there are some players in the squad there, your Regis, who hopefully we can replace with the decent players, because going back to what Andy just said, if we want to challenge City again for the league, we need a better bench. We need to start looking at what City's doing, where you've actually got 15 or 16 players there that can all interchange and be just as good on their day. So we're not quite there. Until we can actually get to that level, I don't know if we can challenge City the way that we did last year. So that for me is the key to success next season will be a good transfer window. We've started well getting Konate, but plenty of work to do, I think. Adding another striker would be good.
I thought Jota was pretty good when he was fit as well.
Yeah, very good call. I think he remarkably slipped in and played really, really well. I didn't expect him to adjust so quickly. The other thing that I thought was impressive about Jota is that he basically picked up where he left off after being out for about 4 or 5 weeks with an injury. So I thought that was pretty impressive that his form didn't tail off and he continued to get goals in between injuries. So yeah, that's Liverpool. Colby, anything else you'd like to add to that, mate?
No, mate. That was a good little summary, mate, and we'll wait and see next season who's fit and ready to start in a couple of months' time. So the turnaround's going to be pretty quick. But what about Leicester's season?
Jeez, I'm still in a bit of disbelief that Leicester didn't finish in the top 4. They've done it again. 2020 they were 5th. In 2021 they were 5th. I still can't believe
you don't call that improvement.
The pull-out kings.
Yeah, wow. they see commitment and they pull out. Yeah, the Durex Leicester. So essentially they what made their season, guys? Well, obviously winning the FA Cup. They managed to keep the football universe at peace, where we didn't have too many cups going to the same team. So Chelsea knocks out City, gets to the final, loses against Leicester. Then Chelsea goes off and beats City. So we don't have too many cups at the same club. So it was quite important, I think, that Leicester won a cup. And obviously it had been a very long time. So credit to them for that. What let them down was similar problems to Liverpool and a few other clubs. They had some big injuries. They lost Barnes. They had Evans missing in the last week of the season there. Sioncho was out for a while. And James Justin, I think he did his ACL. He was in great form before he got injured. So some key injuries to some of their players, notably defenders. Pereira took ages to come back, and he's a great player for them as well. So there are some good things. Castagna come across from Atalanta, and he was fantastic. He really added another attacking dimension for them. He can play on the left or the right, but I think him and Pereira both on each side is exciting for Leicester fans. But yeah, obviously what let them down at the end of the day was that they did win the FA Cup. Credit to them for that. But to be in the top four for such a long time and to not get into Champions League, as I said before, this could prove to be an incredibly important transfer window. And the fact that they're not in the mix with the Champions League guys, and they let that door open for Liverpool to come through, they'll be absolutely pissed off about that for sure. Stats, 2 years in a row, fell out of the top four on the final day, so that's pretty heartbreaking for them. Rising stars, so as far as players that could move, we saw Iheanacho absolutely blitz the last part of the season. I couldn't believe his goal ratios was just incredible. So he was sensational. Other players coming through, you had Fofana, I mentioned Castagna before, but Tielemans is the real question mark for me, is what happens to Tielemans, because I think he's already proven that he is a very classy player, but he went to a sort of, he's progressing really, really nicely, and he's trending well. And that for me makes me think his stocks are going up, and that he might be offered some money from other clubs in this transfer window. So I'm not sure he will be at Leicester when we do the preview.
We'd have him at Liverpool.
Yeah, well, I suspect that we could be one of the teams that actually put some money in for him with Wijnaldum going. So yeah, interesting to see what happens there. But I think Tielemans is definitely rising, falling. Not too many. I mean, I think a few might have plateaued, but the one player I can't get my head around and what happened to him was Cenk Under, who came across from Roma. Like
he could have been the spud of the season.
A spud's got to come out of the ground. I mean, he didn't even come out of the ground. The man wasn't even a potato. He just, I couldn't even believe that. I mean, I think he featured a little bit in the cups, but he was a really creative player, great player in FIFA. Does really good in FIFA, and just for some reason or not, Rodgers just didn't think he was up to it, and he didn't really feature. So that's for me a bit of a question mark. I'm not sure if you boys have more info on that, but he was
a potato that stayed under the ground.
Yeah, no, 6 feet under, that's for sure. Yeah, but for success next season, boys, I mean, obviously they've got a shot of a European trophy. They are in a European competition for all the grief that we're giving them. But what they need for success, I think, is to build, because they really look like they were going to hold their place this year. So I think top four has got to be the goal next year. And if they do lose Tielemans, replacing someone with equal caliber or roundabouts. That's Leicester.
Thanks, Jesse. Up next is me with Bielsa's Leeds, who enjoyed a dream return to the Premier League after that 16-year absence. So they finished in 9th after being promoted from the Championship after winning it the season before. What made their season? It was basically their ability to score goals. I think they scored 62 goals or something like that. I mean, they shipped a few, but they were just, for most of and they tightened up towards the end of the season, but for most of it, they were just outscoring teams. And that really, goals win games. So you'd have to say that they're overachievers there. In our season preview, we said they'd surprise a few, and they basically did that. Bielsa just, kept other teams guessing and just kept his team running at other teams. Whose stocks are rising? I've got to say Bamford here. He played in every game and he got 17 goals and 7 assists. So that's a pretty handy return for someone that a lot of people said wasn't Premier League quality and wasn't going to make it in the Premier League. And that's better than his record in the Championship last season too. So I think he proved those doubters wrong, but the test will be whether he can do it again next season. But Rodrigo would be going the other way. I'd have to say his stocks are probably falling since joining Leeds. Came in for that club record fee. I looked up his stats. He actually had 26 appearances, but about half of those were off the bench, and for a return of just 7 goals and 2 assists. Not really good enough for your record signing. For success next season, just like Sheffield, who had a dream return to the Premier League and then finished in 9th under a much-loved manager, Leeds will want to avoid that major second season syndrome that saw Sheffield relegated at the bottom of the league. I don't think they will. We'll save that for predictions, but in any case, hopefully they'll put on a show for their fans who'll hopefully be back in the stands next season.
Boys, I think Leeds surely they can build from here. That is, I mean, I know that we've obviously talked about Sheffield United, but I don't think it's the same. I don't think we're talking about the same situation, because I think that what Bielsa's had in players like Rafinha and that is a bit of firepower. And if he loses someone like Rafinha and is able to replace it with another player, maybe even another Premier League proven player, then I can't see why they couldn't just build from here. I think that if you think about the long-term project of Leeds coming back up to the Premier League, is surely the idea is that they were going to try and do this season on the sort of bare bones of their ass. But if they could stay in there, surely they just keep building financially and replenishing and hopefully, for them hopping up the table. I think they're in a great position personally, considering the squad, because some of the players in that squad were not Premier League caliber, but they somehow got to the position they are.
Yeah, I think there's also a potential for Leeds to go the other way in terms of they've relied on a lot of star players to score goals and create chances this year, and if those players go, replacing them is difficult. So, yeah, I agree they're in a great position and a great position to build on. They're an enormous club. They've got an enormous fan base. They're back where they should be in the Premier League, but it's very easy to go backwards if you lose your best players. So that'll be really interesting if, Rafinha goes, if Bamford goes, these are players they really rely on. So Leeds will be a really interesting watch next year. I do expect them to stay up, but it'll be very interesting to see how they go.
Yeah, the off-season is going to be really critical for them to see where the interest is, because obviously, there are a few players more than what I mentioned as well whose stocks are rising. Obviously, you've got Fantasy Premier League darling Stu Dallas, whose stocks are rising. It would be remiss of me not to mention Stu Dallas, the Lundstrom of 2020, 2021.
I think he was player of the season as well. Leeds player of the season, Stuart Dallas.
So he has to have a mention here, doesn't he? But let's keep it moving, boys. And moving back to the Championship next season, it's Fulham and Andy.
Yeah, Coles, I was going to say that's fitting to talk about them after Leeds when we discussed the dream return. Like, there's a dream return to the Championship on the cards for Fulham after an emotional roller coaster of a season. So, like, the terrible start that we all predicted, a little improvement in form, and then it just sort of petered out again. Again, in a parallel to Leeds, what probably killed them this year was the lack of ability to score goals, which probably shouldn't have come as a surprise because they were, relying on the yoga hard man, Alexander Mitrovic, for the first half of the season, and they haven't got anyone that can score penalties. Caballero, in particular, continued to miss chance after chance every week, and I think he missed at least 2 pens. And then there was obviously the Premier League's best Panenka effort. Boy Lookman. So that was what it really comes down to for Fulham.
I think they missed 4 penalties in a row in a stretch of like 6 games or something. It was unbelievable, and it was like 3 or 4 different players as well. It was City-esque.
Yeah, so this is a team that, but the difference is it's a team that can't buy a goal. Like, for love of money, like, please just be able to take a penalty. But so it's that, and while they did actually bring in a few good players, one of the problems I think for Fulham was it probably took them too long to get people in the door, and they were bringing in signings on deadline day, who, while they had a positive impact, took a while to settle in. In terms of whether they overachieve or underachieve, based on that middle stretch of form, I think it's fair to say that they underachieved because they could have done better than to be relegated for the second time in 3 seasons. So, again, disappointing year, I think, for Fulham and their fans, for whose stocks are rising. We talked about the guys coming in. Joachim Anderson, the big dangerous centre-half, had a massive impact. His arrival, actually, they ended up with 9 clean sheets after he got in the door, and before that they had 0. So there's a sort of tangible effect there. And Alphonse Areola, who out of all the goalkeepers had the best, I don't know how to explain this, but the best post-shot XG in the league. So of all expected shots that he took, that he faced, they had the best non-goals conceded XG or whatever.
I thought it would be
it's something, whatever that is.
Most saves like after it hit the post or something.
Yeah.
Who stops
Very niche
falling?
stat.
Yeah,
that is niche.
Yeah,
We'll need to look out for that one.
Yeah, you have to look out for it because I didn't really understand. I knew what it was getting at, but I can't.
Yeah,
This is why you tune into More Than a Game, ladies and gentlemen.
So just giving people the stuff that they need, not all Damo's stats. Whose stocks are falling? Mitrovic, Cavaliero, Scott Parker, not sort of being able to keep going, but
Mate,
and,
I'm
what do they
going to
need?
disagree with you there. I think Scott Parker, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the Premier League again next season because I think he did a pretty decent job with some pretty lousy cattle.
Yeah,
But you love Ole, so how are we supposed to take that, Tommie?
Yeah,
And hate Lampard, so
yeah.
And hate Lampard.
What do they need? Look, other than players will take more penalties, they need more players because they had a lot of guys in on loan who are now going to disappear. So that squad's going to look fairly threadbare pretty soon, actually. And that's the full emotional roller coaster.
Thanks for that, Andy. Sounds like Fulham could be doing a Sunderland maybe and going all the way down to League Two or League One.
You can join Sheffield United.
Certainly, if they are a bunch of cattle, they're very malnourished. Back to you, Colby.
Jesus. Andy, you're up again with Everton.
Yeah, again, another team that's continued to play with my emotions this year for the second season in a row. They finished 10th, which is an improvement from 12th, but it's not quite the improvement that I'd hoped for. I think I'd initially picked them for European football this year, which is a shame because I think that was a real possibility at one point. The stat that probably sums up their season the most is that on their away form alone, they would have finished 4th, while on their home form, they would have finished 15th, which is even worse than they ended up. Again, like some real highlights in that season. Obviously, a big win in the Merseyside derby and a month of solid top 4 positions, but they just kind of petered out. Whose stocks are rising in the Everton team? Obviously, Dominic Calvert-Lewandowski. At the start of the year, he was the striker that just didn't score, and he ended up with 21, including a few outstanding goals and a derby winner. Other guys, I think, who really improved this thing. I mean, Allen was known in Europe and was a sort of much coveted player, but has really just walked straight into the Premier League and he just fills that role perfectly for them. And that was a midfield that really needed an overhaul. And him and Doucouré together are an outstanding team. I mean, James, obviously, transformational effect on that team, but not for the entirety of the season. I don't know. I mean, not transformational in the way.
I was going to say,
Don't start this again.
In the way that the rules
is it before or after the procedure?
We'll have to edit this out. This is not PC, boys.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, he's lost it here.
I just keep remembering the final line of the thing where they said,
Dropped his dick off, lad. All right.
Oh, I'm glad you knew. Okay. Look, whose stocks are falling? Probably Pickford's. Honestly, I think they could probably do with bringing in another.
How does Pickford get the number 1 at the Euros? Like, surely he can't get the number 1 after a season that he's had.
He's just continued to be inconsistent.
Southgate loves him. He will.
Yeah, Southgate does love him.
And the other key point, other than keeping King Carla there, is along with Pickford, they need to examine the rest of that back line. But I think Keane, after having a great season the year before, has kind of dropped off a bit and is not getting any faster. So I think they could do with at least one more centre half there to shrunk the back line, because their problem this year was just conceding lots of shit goals, including that one at Sheffield actually.
All right. Well, thanks, Andy, for that enlightening review of Everton's season. George, let's go to Crystal Palace now. How did they do, George?
Boys, as some of you may have predicted, Crystal Palace finished 14th. They actually finished 14th the year before as well. So
improvement.
No, but a pretty sort of standard sort of Crystal Palace season, whereby they sort of looked in danger a little bit, and then they sort of pulled together to get the results they needed, and then comfortably finished in that mid-table. Interesting. Well, as sort of you would have thought, they were led by Willie Zaha with 11 goals and 2 assists. But interestingly, boys, guess who the second top scorer was at Palace this season?
Benteke.
Wasn't Benteke.
My boy.
10 goals, believe it or
10?
not. 10 goals.
Checkers.
Yeah, I had to double check that, but he somehow managed to get 10. Eberici Eze also had a really good season coming in, but he's obviously snapped his Achilles on the day he made the provisional England squad as well. So it's pretty tough for him, and he'll be out for probably a large portion of next season. So that does lead me into some of the stuff. It's going to be stuff to watch for next season, with Roy Hodgson obviously retiring as manager. A lot of he did pretty well, but I think there was some criticism that they could have played a bit more expansive. They could have pushed it a little bit more and played more attacking football. So will be one to watch in terms of how they replace him, and also going forward, boys. 11 of their players are uncontracted for next season. So it's going to be not only an overhaul in respect of the team and also the manager they're getting in. Now, in terms of managers, the rumours of Dyche, Lampard, Nuno's been thrown up today. So
Chris Wilder's been thrown in the conversation as well. There's been a chat.
And Eddie Howe, who obviously who's not going to join Celtic. So
Postecoglou, is he in there as well? Or
Mark Bosnich is on the odds list as well.
So I think basically just to run through, what made their season. Obviously Zaha's goals and influence, and were they underachievers or overachievers? Well, they probably overachieved, but then arguably they could have played a bit more expansive and could have pushed the lines a little bit more and maybe done better. So whose stocks are rising, whose stocks are falling? Well, I think we talked about the Rice thing as well, and it's a similar thing with Zaha. He's probably at the age now where he's probably not going to move. I would have thought, but he at the start of every season he's always pushing to leave. So that's one to watch. And the other one I'll throw out there obviously is Eze. Hopefully he can come back from his injury, because he looked really good, and he's another one of those guys like St. Maximin who, when he gets going, he's tough to stop. The other one I'd throw out is Tyreek Mitchell, who sort of came through. I think he's a left back, and he sort of solidified his position in the team, a young defender. So in terms of going forward, as I mentioned, what do they need for success next season? Well, they need a manager, and they need to sign some players or keep hold of guys, and it's probably a little bit too hard to predict what's going to happen to Palace, because there's just so many.
It feels like it's that every year with Palace.
Yeah,
they need to sign players. They need to keep a hold of their players, and then it kind of just stays at the status quo forever.
Yeah, they re-sign everyone for a year.
I just want to know if they've re-signed Woy's right-hand man, who unfortunately, with no crowds in the ground, was very vocal and came through in the microphones very clearly every time Palace took possession. He's like, "Go on, Wolf! Go on, Wolf!"
Yeah,
the assistant.
I think that's their season. That's their season. That was their strategy in a nutshell. There,
and he was
like
just
an sevens.
It was just expletives. Every second word was an expletive, and you had like BT Sport and Sky Sport scrambling to apologise for every swear word.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that sort of sums up sort of where Palace are at, and one to watch for what they're going to do next year with because they've got a squad of experienced Premier League players with your Milivojevic's, your McCarthy's, your Kleins, your Cahills, your Benteke's, your Ayus, your Wards. So yeah, it will be one to watch in terms of how they sort of go and whether they're going to change the strategy moving forward in respect of who they appoint as a manager. Okay.
Good, George. So yeah, take us from Crystal Palace to the Crystal Palace's away kit doppelganger Chelsea.
Oh yeah. We've touched on Chelsea quite a lot, so I'll make it brief. But managed to hang on to fourth position despite sort of a sort of tumultuous.
Despite Lampard's best efforts.
Despite Lampard. Well, they started the season really quite brightly and were scoring a few goals, but you knew that there was some defensive issues, and they really came to fruition. And obviously Lampard got the chop, and Tuchel came in from basically January and righted the ship and basically sorted out the defence. And a lot of that has got to do with sort of your Mendy coming in, and also Kante being fit. I think you saw when Kante was fit and firing towards the latter end of the season, or the middle part, really, sort of solidified the team, and also the use of the wing backs as well, 3 centre backs, which sort of Tuchel brought in, and
Rudiger as well. Rudiger.
No, wing backs, baby, wing backs. And I think the emergence of Chilwell obviously coming in, Reece James. And obviously the player of the season, Mason Mount, who was ever present in both Tuchel and Lampard's teams, and who really provided the spark when guys were in and out and guys were getting injured, and who I think so in terms of next year it's going to be Tuchel's team, and we'll see what he does with all the sort of the fat around the squad, because Pulisic was in and off the bench a lot. Ziyech as well. Havertz had a long COVID and was in and out of the team. There's going to be guys like Giroud, Tammy Abraham who are going to leave. And a couple of other loan guys coming back. Your Loftus-Cheeks, your Conor Gallagher's, and those types. So the rumor has that they're going to give Tuchel a bit of money to play with, and we'll see what he does. We'll see what he does with it. So, and potentially, obviously, the gaping hole is, as discussed, as a striker and someone who can score more than I think Jorginho was the top scorer with 7 goals, and I think most of them were penalties. Yeah, so, I think that tells you a little bit of a tale of how they managed to, get into the top 4, which was probably by defence rather than attack. And you've got your Timo Werners, your Havertz, your Pulisic, your Ziyech. Mounts, those guys have got a Mount, not so much, but the rest of them really need to pull their weight in terms of goals, and that comes down to playing consistently and being fit. They were in and out, a few of them as well. So one to watch for how they're going to fill that number 9 hole, because it looks like Tammy and Giroud are going, and Werner you probably don't want to back for 20 plus a season based on how he's.
Don't know if we've mentioned it before, boys, but Ziyech has got a wand of a left foot. Just want to know where he fits in, because the guy's an absolute gun, but he's struggled to find a place in the new system.
Yeah, I heard he's off to Hogwarts.
Yeah, well, they tried to. I mean, he actually started the season really well, and he was probably our best player before he got injured, and that coincided with Lampard getting sacked, and then he couldn't quite find a spot in Tuchel's team because he was played as a 10. He was played on the left. Probably his best position is probably on the right, letting him cut in and doing his thing. And obviously he deserves to start. He's a talented enough player to start, but you've got all those guys as well. And as you saw in big games, it looks like Tuchel probably didn't trust him enough and preferred to play, your Mount and your Werners with a striker as opposed to your Pulisic and your Ziyech's going forward. So, he's going to need a big pre-season, and we'll see if he fits into the plans. But probably at the moment, he's the one that's probably on the periphery.
Thanks for that, George. Obviously Tuchel had a great season, came in and arguably turned the team around, and as of this morning, won the Champions League final, was going to get a big war chest from Abramovich. So looking forward to seeing him get that war chest and then be sacked 3 months later, as is
As
Big
Abramovich
Sam
wants.
He Big Sam available.
Yeah, so, a wild ride on the one hand and, wild inconsistency on the other, a wild consistency on the other with Burnley, Tommie.
Bit of a rough season for old Burnley, the other claret and blue team in the Premier League, or one of three this year. They finished 17th, only just above relegation, just the 11 points clear this season. Bit of a drop from 10th the previous year, though. Burnley, you know exactly what you're going to get, though. They turn up and they play 4-4-2. Chris Wood up top with the long balls up to him, and defensively they were very good again. You exactly knew what you were going to get each week from Burnley. No surprises there. Arguably, just surviving is a big deal for Burnley. So they've achieved their goal. I'm not really going to say that they overachieved or underachieved. They just achieved. But I guess in terms of Burnley's, going forward, they've only got 3 players under 29 who made more than 4 appearances. That's Tarkowski, Brownhill, and O'Neill. And we mentioned it already about Crystal Palace and about how they're going to need some players. Obviously, at some point, they need to sort of start to try to regenerate this squad as well at Burnley. And with Dyche possibly leaving to go to Palace, which is a move that I actually would think would be really good, because Palace have at least got more money than Burnley do. So it'd be interesting to see what Dyche does there. It would be pretty bad times, I think, for Burnley if they were to lose Dyche, because they don't seem to want to spend any money. So in terms of stocks that are rising and falling, look, Dyche, he's I do wonder if his time to move to a bigger club has probably closed. I remember a couple of years ago they were talking about him going to Everton. I don't think he's going to go there anymore. I don't think he's really talked in sort of the circles as being suitable for someone like Spurs or something like that. So probably Palace is probably the heights of
stealing.
It's pretty much what he's looking at these days. So,
but isn't that just a sideways move? You're just moving from Burnley to Palace?
No, I think it is actually a step up, really, because at least Palace have got some money. Like they spent money in the last few years, and they spent, what was it, 20 odd million on Eze. So they've shown that they're willing to open their wallets and spend a bit of money there. But
progress.
Yeah, exactly. What will be success next year? Holding on to Dyche, not getting relegated, and I guess if they can have another player emerge sort of similar to Josh Brownhill, that would be a real positive for their squad as well. And that's Burnley.
Thanks, Tommie. Jack Cork. More Jack Cork chat on the preview pod, boys.
The cork factor. The cork factor.
Got a cork in it.
Looking forward to seeing them uncorked next season. Brighton are up next, boys. I've got Brighton. I'm off them. You know I'm off Brighton. The less said about Brighton, the better. This season they finished 16th. Last season they finished 15th. Not progress. Not major overall underachievers. They secured another season of Premier League football. Goal difference was actually better than last year, despite finishing lower down on the table, but they were never really an exciting watch. Mopé and Trossard fizzled early. I think the lack of fans, like Jesse was saying about Liverpool, Brighton are one of those clubs as well, where, at the very least, it detracted from the spectacle on TV for Brighton. But I think significantly so at the grounds, and the players would have really noticed that. What majorly let them down, of course, it was Aaron Moy leaving in the off-season, in the pre-season, and Potter and the club forcing Matty Ryan out. And when you do that, you're bound to, no good can come of that. So
it's Aussie bashing, mate. Aussie bashing.
Just absolute rampant racism at Brighton against Australians. what do they need for success next season? In the absence of getting in a couple of Aussies, they need more of the whatever they did this season. Which is getting Trossard and Mopé to back to their best, getting Lamperty back on the trajectory he was on before that horrible injury. And if players like White and other emerging players in the team can continue their impressive form, I'm sure Brighton will be just fine. They won't flirt with relegation, but, I'll pretty much ignore them from now on. You're dead to me, Brighton.
I don't know if they can improve their XG, though, guys. I mean, as far as heat maps go, they're absolutely through the charts. They just can't put the ball in the net, unfortunately. The question I'd have just on the back of that is Potter. So does he stay? He did sign a contract, I think, pretty much at the start of the season that he was, signal his intent that he was going to be around for a fair while. But this merry-go-round, if someone comes along like a Spurs and says Potter will take you, does he just go? And where does Brighton go from there?
He's pretty well regarded. So
maybe Ziyech and Cresswell could go to Brighton, a couple of wands in to just help Potter out.
Colby, there's one thing that I left out of sort of my highlights, and that was I just want to bring to everyone's attention that wild game of Brighton versus Man United. I think it was like the second or third week of the season, where Brighton not only managed to hit the post, I think it was like 5 times in the 90 minutes, but also had the penalty given after full time as well. So they hit, not only did they hit the post 5 times, but then lost after the full time whistle. It was just the most Brighton shit you've ever seen.
Fernandes penalty.
Bank on it. All right, Tommie, let's go with Aston Villa.
I'll go with Villa.
Damo,
on my list.
Damo, you jump in with Villa if you want.
That's all right, mate. That's all right. I'll jump in.
Way to panic me, mate.
Villa finished 11th after staying up by the skin of their teeth last year after some VAR controversy gave them the point that kept them up. They've had improvement. They built on that. Finished last year of 17th. What made their season was the Jack Grealish effect. I think he contributed hugely to their success. He's crucial to the way they play and to the belief of the team and the fans. But I think this season they had wins over Leicester, Liverpool. They did the double over Arsenal. They beat Tottenham, and they got a win and a draw against Chelsea. So if you're talking about things that defined their season, it's those big games against clubs that finished above them where they got a lot of points. We spoke about it before. They started the season really well, and they kind of finished well, but that middle part of the season was shocking from Villa. But all in all, a great year of progression for them. They cement themselves in the Premier League. They're kind of like Leeds. They're a big club that's back in the Premier League. It's where they deserve to be. They've got a great set of supporters. I've got
Prince
some
William.
And Prince William. As always, I've got some good stats for you. It's Villa's best Premier League points total in 11 years. Best since they finished 6th on 64 points under Martin O'Neill. The future bodes well as also Villa beat Liverpool in the FA Youth Cup final. So it's more promising signs for Villa. It's actually the first time they've won the FA Youth Cup in 19 years. Which, fun fact, Wayne Rooney, they beat Everton in that final 19 years ago. A 16-year-old Wayne Rooney started up front, and he was partnered by a 18-year-old David Carney on the left wing for Everton.
Oh.
So that's a bit of a fun fact for you. In terms of whether they overachieved or underachieved, I think they overachieved this season. I don't think anyone expected them to do as well as they did. A lot of people expected them to be in a relegation battle, so it's a successful season for Villa. Stocks are rising. Of course, Jack Grealish. It's getting harder and harder to keep a hold of him with big clubs sniffing around. Tyrone Mings had a great season, was rewarded with a spot in the provisional England Euros side. Tommie mentioned earlier Martinez. He played really well. He said his reason for leaving Arsenal on a permanent deal was to cement his spot as Argentina's number 1. I think he's definitely done that now. He'll be going to the Copa America and most likely the World Cup in a couple of years. And I think Ollie Watkins, who was a big signing in terms of money, came in and he finished the season as the top scorer in all comps for the club. So a couple of people there got rising stocks. And in terms of falling stocks, I think Ross Barkley, he started the season well, but he played well in patches. But, I mean, his transfer value continues to plummet. He just can't seem to put together a long stretch of games of quality performances to the kind of the level that people expect him to play at. So, apart from that, I think the rest of the Villa squad kind of, played to standards or above standards this year. In terms of success for next season, the key to their success is keeping Grealish. He's their star player. He's their captain. He's the poster boy for the club. I think losing him puts a big dagger in the momentum that the club have been able to build. And I think another key to their success is continuing that really stubborn style of football that Dean Smith has tried to implement. They're very stuck in their style and they're very what I'm trying to say is that they're very persistent at the way they play football, and Dean Smith has got a lot of raps on the way he goes about playing. So I think continuing on that, and I also think bringing through a whole bunch of their FA Youth Cup stars. So they've got amazing youth stocks at Villa. They always have. It's been a hallmark of their club for many years now, and I think that'll be a key to their success in next year and in years to come.
Nice. Thanks, Damo. Tommie, did you have anything different to that in your review of us?
My notes were bare.
All right. Last but not least, Arsenal. George, take us home.
Yeah, boys. I'll keep this pretty quick. Keep it short and sweet, unlike Arsenal season. So first full season in charge for Arteta, and it was a bit chaotic. It was a bit, reminiscent of Arsenal's history in the last few years. Interestingly enough, boys, they finished 8th, which ends a run of 25 successive campaigns in Europe. So probably
you could say there's no progress there.
Well, they got 61 points, which is a little more than 5 more than the year before, but obviously. That they finished 8th, which is and had 13 defeats, which is a bit of a sign that things weren't great in the squad. Obviously, they had some issues defensively. Arteta was sort of brought in to bring a different style of football, and he tried to just solidify in it. And they didn't get a lot out of their Aubameyang. Lacazette was their top scorer. I think the good thing for Arsenal is obviously the young guys that have come through. So your Sakas, your Smith Rowes, they're bringing some serious hope, and they're seriously talented guys. And if they're going to bank on those guys going forward, then it does look promising in some respects. In other respects, defensively, they've had some issues. David Luiz is gone as well, who provided some leadership despite making mistakes. There's question marks over Leno. Should he stay? Should he go? Obviously, we all want Matty Ryan to come in and take the spot. And he only played 3 games for Arsenal, but looked okay. So there's a question mark about Leno going forward. Obviously the Willian stuff and some of their signings. Did they really need Odegaard? Are they going to sign Odegaard permanently? Will Odegaard affect Smith Rowe's development? Aubameyang re-signed a deal at the start of the year to keep him at the club. He got malaria and had some injury issues, so he wasn't the Aubameyang of old. And is Lacazette going to stay as well? Do they need both of them? The same sort of questions going forward for Arsenal. Is Arteta good enough to get them back in the top 4? Is he a good manager? I don't even know. I'm not really sure. I mean, he learned from Pep, I guess, and he had good raps, and we thought. He'd changed things up, but has he really changed things up? I don't think so. It's a hard one, and he's under a lot of pressure. They obviously fell short in the Europa League as well, which they were putting a lot of stock in, and they weren't able to get the job done there. So a pretty underwhelming season. A few shining lights, as I've said, with some of the young guys coming through. There's some question marks about their defence going forward as well, as is the case. They moved off Ozil, which is one good thing, I guess, and. It's going to be an interesting season. I think he's probably going into next year under probably the most pressure of the existing managers, just given how they went this year, and it was his first full season in charge. But as other teams have done, that people won't hesitate to pull the trigger. And finally, I thought I'd touch on it, but there's obviously all that pressure in respect of the Kroenke out movement, the Spotify owner, and a couple of ex-players. They're backing a change at the club, but more investment in the squad. Better fan engagement as well, because they were also part of the Super League movement. So that'll be one to watch. I don't think they'll sell Arsenal anyway. I don't think they care about public pressure or the Kroenkes, or given the ownership over the last few years and some of the decisions made. But yeah, it will be interesting to watch the start Arteta makes next year, because and if they are going to invest and bring players in and regenerate a little bit around those young guys.
Thanks for that, George. Plenty happening at Arsenal, and it'll be interesting to follow them over the off season. Arteta under plenty of pressure next season, which we look forward to covering on the pod next season as well. And fitting that we should end our Premier League season review for another season with a club that lost the Europa League final to Unai Emery, because for us at MTAG, it's time to say good evening to all of our listeners. Thanks for sticking with us for another season. We've really appreciated all the engagement that you've had with the pod, and continue to write in with your questions and get around us in the YouTube comments and on social media in general. If you've enjoyed the show today, give us a shout out on social media, or recommend us to a mate or your mum or whoever. You can also follow us on social media.
My mum loves the pod.
My mum doesn't know how to download the pod, and long may it continue. But you can also follow us on Twitter or Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video version of this pod, which drops about a day before the pod comes out. Links to all of those in the show notes. Later this week, we'll be back to review the weekend's A-League action. But until then, enjoy the football.